Thus I have heard. At one time the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain, with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of the Nama called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, How should the son of the lineage train, who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness. And having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomenon. There is no quality of sight, and so on until no quality of mind, no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so on up to no old age and death, and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete life. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva trained in the profound perfection of wisdom. And the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and says of the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Venerable Abong Rinpoche had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
As Kadamba tradition goes, there are two actions from the beginning of the teachings and actions at the end. Sections at the beginning is to cultivating appropriate motivations. So when speaking about cultivating appropriate motivations or shaping one's motivation to receive the teachings, one should first visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the space before oneself, who is surrounded by the lineage gurus of the great deities on the stages of the path of enlightenment, or the Lam Rim Chenmo, and all the root and lineage gurus. So in their presence, not just visualizing being yourself or a few people in your surrounding, rather you visualize entire sentient beings in your surrounding down to the insects. Because just as when someone wants to be there where they can gain some benefits and where they know that there will be some kind of beneficial, conditions may met going somewhere in certain places. In the same manners, all sentient beings, without exceptions, have a similar wish of achieving this complete state of happiness. It is for this, imagine that all of those are in your surrounding, being in the presence of the great beings, the beings that we have visualized earlier. So now, having visualized those great beings before oneself and imagining that yourself being in their presence, now the motivation here is that one should first cultivate the convinced faith or devotion, or the unfathomable devotions of the faith towards great beings that you have visualized, and and cultivate a genuine compassion and sense of caring and sense of connectedness with all other sentient beings by understanding that we are, though all sentient beings have a genuine wish to achieve happiness and overcome suffering. Go ahead. No, sorry. However, that is not happening. It is because of their, karma and so forth. So, so just try to cultivate a fervent faith or devotion towards the object of refuge and extending one's compassion towards all other sentient beings. And think about that. Our time of this 2 hours of time frame, I will not waste this time and try my best to remain cultivating in these motivations and remaining myself, my very listening to these teachings, although I may not have a fully understand the meaning that is being the meaning of the teachings that is being taught here. I will do my best to remain myself intact with these motivations and intentions. With this kind of motivations, let's take 2 minutes to meditate, to reinforce one's motivations. With these motivations, the teachings that we are receiving today is the light of 3 worlds, the great deities on the stages of the path, the enlightenment.
개된지 뒤자서 뒤자 쉬네 상추나지 좀서 대내 되긴 돼봐라 정말 뭐 종합 생비 강진신비 수주 종합 생비 배 니다 되는 것이 배비 취지라 이는 가서 되는 것을 봐봐 니 진의 제에 니 숨법이 취하다 말 숨법이 니 강사다 소액이 취대 데려와서 소소도 초아지비다
The teachings that we are receiving, when we speak about receiving the teachings of the Dharma, our focus is not very much to gain some kind of benefit in this lifetime. It is the benefit that we are receiving out of receiving these teachings is mainly dedicated towards achievement of one's happiness in our future life. So for that, how can we, what kind of potential the teachings have that one can be able to achieve happiness? One will become a potential for achieving happiness in one's future life. And then it comes to the question of who actually taught these teachings? How authentic these teachings how authentic the teachings are, and the teacher as well. So then when it comes to this question, then it goes directly to the Buddha Shakyamuni, who came to this world more than 2,600 years ago, who achieved enlightenment and Bodhgaya, and gave the teachings, extensive teachings to his direct disciples, which is then preserved and propagated by the great Indian masters of the Nalanda. And the most kind teacher who actually brought these teachings to the Tibet was Atisha Divamkara Shirijana, who is invited and requests the teachings by all those fortunate disciples of Tibet, the fortunate Tibetan disciples. It is upon their request, Atisha Divamkara Shirijana has granted the teachings, what we call as lamp for path to enlightenment. And that this very teaching, the root of teachings, is later on then elaborated and commented by great Master Lama Tsongkhapa. And that is the teaching that we are actually, the subject matter of the teaching is we are discussing here.
되게 조금도 되지는 시도에 나를 친구 사제잖아 아니 중국전부 대비신 제발 저와도 나가를 기바지 취지 치와세데 저니가 되게 단단히 이제 콩 도샤나 민주의 명예 되지 사진이 보디
So the first two outlines of the greatness of the authors given in order to show the teachings as noble souls, and showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings are both encapsulated in my explanations earlier, my earlier explanations.
뒤진 가서 소도 탄대지 주부진 신실라 다 가질랑가 되는 만로와이나 노아르센 타지 통해 치러와 맞아 지 인정으로 뭐 좀어버지 송바 하기랑가 로그 계시면 시야지 탄대지 주부진 신실라 타빌랑은 로그고야나 아니 라만 되던 대신 시작하기 중경에게 랑가 되는 마도 조사면 나 랑가 되기 땡이라 아니 그 가사다 맞죠 저런 것이 이병에 받치요 말이마도 관전 네 신의 댄스는 말이 그 손주기 받는 나가는 말로나 아니 레사 그 손도아 그담 상제당 집에 담바성이 떼라 마병이 제도나 네 레사의 가진하고 말이었어 집에 담바 대다기 손바나기 제수다 아니 해고서들 해고를 해서 해야 돼 랑만노가 지는 주고서들 당마로
So it is said that if one have a genuine aspiration to attain liberations, then this is the only path that we need to follow, the unmistaken path, complete and unmistaken path that we need to follow if one has a genuine aspiration to achieve liberations. When I talk about only this path, I'm not talking about just mere only following the Lama Tsongkhapa's teaching, but unmistaken teachings. That is what I mean. Unmistaken and complete teachings, beginning from just as we find in the great deities on the stages of the path enlightenment itself. It's unmistaken teaching given by the Lama Tsongkhapa, beginning from reliance upon the practice of reliance upon spiritual teacher, all the way to the achievement of unity or achievement of complete enlightenment. So, so if we are consider ourselves as a genuine aspiration to attain enlightenment, genuine seeker of enlightenment or genuine seeker of liberations, and those are the authentic teachings, the teachings that is given by the great beings of the past.
Okay. Yeah. 대지. 근데 당가도 사지 손바대라니. 년시 제다시 이런 바 생각되네. 최신이라 나마 세대지 여나야. 나마 세대들이 최신도 가는 말 다야 레네야 세제 말이. 다 나마 최신이 거라. 아니 다 나마 계신 말이. 다 개개 세대지. 개개 세대되게 아니 교로 야고 인바사지 마세 주만은 와지 시에 그래. 아니 최년에 대한 지소서 대파상 구조적으로 많이 봐. 아니 댐바도 준비하게 나죠 여기 지지도네. 아니 계속하이나 아니 라 최근에 같은 로서나 아니 주연차당 아니 예바 강연 연구요 말고 지 댐바 지 러시아고.
So next outlines begins with how to listen to the teachings in which the teachers and its authors are great. So in this regard, so now the teacher who is actually giving the teachings must have a proper knowledge so that he or she can convey those teachings to the disciples unmistakenly and in a proper sequential, unmistakenly and proper sequential order. And also the listeners, it is not just listen to the teachings out of faith and devotions, but rather the listeners must also have a sharp intellect or the discernments that can be able to discern what is right and what is wrong.
다 담방은 너무 제대로 이런 바 생각들이. 다 담방은 너무 제대로 자이 사지지 바다. 아니 담방냥가 치셔되니 런치 자원 신이 대비체 되는로 제다신 이거 세대로. 아주지 런치 자원 신이 대비체세데 지 개개들이 더가지고 최최되되는 자세서 지 많이 봐. 아니 소소게 아니 치거사기 저 다다 개개소리 지금 어디 저걸 봐도 아주 신이 대비체 거르세데 아니 아마도서기 지 개개들라 지 가서 샤페사는 기샤제사는 묘앞에서 선지 고안해서 몇 논들에도 어떻게 허덕 얘기지나 콜로지기 차창에서 지금도 텔레지면 전화 기억 말아 대나 이게 런지 자와 신이 대비 센스디 수수기 호정 제사기 내려와 얘기한테 세다 되면 그거래 세대래도.
So then the next outline, which is the fourth outline, the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught actual instructions. And this very outline has this subdivision of its own, how to rely on the teachers, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and how to students then train their mind after having relied on the teachers. So when we speak about how to rely on the teachers, which is the root of spiritual path, traditionally we have a tendency of thinking that when we speak about the spiritual teachers, we should have a great devotions, and one needs to make a offerings out of faith and so on. So this is not really a necessary; it is a secondary. But what you should think about when we speak about the teacher is you just think about a teacher. You normally receive whatever the knowledge that you give the giver of knowledge. If you go to school, so you have a teacher, and you know the teacher knows the more than you, and the teacher will give you the knowledge, and it will increase your knowledge. And this kind of motivation that you should have at this point. And when you are attending the teaching, you just think of that I'm receiving the teaching because the teacher is actually giving me the teaching. I need the knowledge of Dharma and so on.
啊，对，那电脑逻辑的讲什么了？你去，他们设计嘛，讲到，这最近主要他们设计呢，也哪里情况？写比高了，设计嘛，做把的，在设计的里头主要的，你我说哪里情况？前年讲一点，你就不当被下线人也是了的。
It is a tradition that that is teachers who teaches Lam Rim Chenmo, the great deities and the stages of the path enlightenment, to actually go through these outlines, beginning from the greatness of the authors given in the teachings as a noble source and so forth, all the way to the end.
他对他是把了你去，你苗子的，你把了，你是为了。 对于电脑你不能必须给我当，你不接单人必须你给我接单人必须了，你拿起拿家了，你把这知道，你不能做我去，那你不能做我了，送这个穷的听我拿起来嘛，娘子呢，这个人的，这个钱别拿起来嘛，娘子呢，直接他帮忙人这，他这个钱别拿起来嘛，娘子呢，知道送，提前了就别过，甚至看那点吧，甚至知道这边去，甚至呢，小包路直接他帮忙人这啥，他甚至呢，小包路去了送，甚至呢，小包路不比较深，小包的了了了。 上节门这个电话，老把路被人把你写过，而且老把你这啥，到老把路被人把你写过了，你贴吧怎么就老老知道，贴吧的多的贴吧老老直接去，到东部了送，像深圳东部了，旁边像我讲的就是的，南巴从从那去打那边去，到东部人这次，到从那去打那边去了，你刚老老比些，点老把那的去，点了点了就打老别人吧。 点了接到了，他东北人的，他点了接到了别人把了，你修个就了这档，七八的发现他们年了，至于东北这，发现他们年了这了，这里主因啥也，现在的劳动一片，电你刚刚个别嘛的，电你电影这跟着这些对吧？现在劳动嘛，你电你刚刚别就这样个人也把收拾了，直接接到收拾东北主东北俺的，到收拾了这个你现在了这劳动了这东北这，到劳动了这了行了说，行啥劳动就做点吧。 那劳动就说的有，劳动岗位最方便，劳动都比车去，东北来实现，东北来送人，那个长点的年代这段些吧，第二那就我们这个去大疆啊，东北你就到店了，东北这，东北你就到不你，在矿南年呢就别人把这在矿南年店了，我，东北这在矿南年店了，我各项工作啊，在我这边的路康一些吧，你东北你就到我这了，去去。 他东北各项工作了，各项工整个比较这样，各项工作嘛这边进入个吧，你让路下吧去，你把各项工整个比较这样去，嘛的，这各项工你把各项工嘛这边进入个吧是，但我说都是不把各种这样子呢，但我说他妈没把你弄出小三个早的搞小的是说呢，大等真吧，生意的，然后经济些你就能，大等真吧是一个早钱呢。 点了出来，大大把的，你看得见，有点看有没有就是说，你的你可以找几个当真生的了。
Now, here, what is gone wrong with us, right from the beginningless time up until now, is because not being able to identify this grasping itself that prevents us from achieving the happiness of samsara as well as the happiness of beyond samsara, and not being able to, which actually precludes us from achieving these qualities of the authentic qualities of the samsara and beyond samsara or nirvana. This is actually done by our own grasping as independent self, which then induce which then generated this self-cherishing mind, which is self-cherishing mind is actually induced by the self-grasping mind. And those two are the main hindrance for our achievement of happiness of samsara and nirvana.
되지. 다 근데 거의 자와집에 단지데 뭐 이제 말 다음에도 되게 단지데 로바인가 셰발라 또 거의 자와집에 다도 주변 세는 간전진 그래. 간전질로 강사하게 단지 세 그래. 말에 단지 세 그래. 아니 대매바기 또 비로텔 다음에도 비셔서 간전질을 세 그래. 선나라비 되게 라사기 또 되게 아니 가서 가장 문제 봐. 네 가장 문제 마도 되게 루드스 까봐. 아니 이 카투킨데 다 이거서 봐봐.
So now, at this point, we are having a discussions on the identification of the self-grasping mind, which is the wrong thought or the erroneous thought regarding self and phenomena. So how do we identify this? And what really becomes a remedy towards this self-grasping mind? And when it comes to the remedy of the self-grasping mind, it's the wisdom, realization, selflessness. And so now, in order to achieve the wisdom, realization, selflessness, first of all, one needs to identify objects that needs to be negated. And one must identify what kind of objects that needs to be negated, and having negated that object, what will be established in the place of these negations. So when it comes to this, then we are here in this particular chapter that we are discussing on the identifying the objects that is to be negated, and then
되지.
the negating the not being negating the object of negation that is identified by the other system. That's what.
아마스 주쇼는 시에서는 얘네 남의 도별 하동시비 가르에스 남의 도별 하동시바라 남의 도별 하동이 다음에 봐 간대지 또 그랬어서나 동봉한 속이 가전들이 지가니 이게 뭐서 남의 냅도 그랬어 계시셔야 되래.
So in brief, that we are on the we are discussing on we're on the process of discussing the or the insight that ascertains this ascertains the selflessness. And so in order to gain this ascertainment of selflessness, and then first one need to negate what is this, which is the self or the object of self-grasping mind. This to be negated.
되지. 맞아 로를 방치 돼서 저러. 이시마 로디는 고급도 세 많이 받지. 맞아 이 가르시에 버서나 오마 탄지가 있으기도 주네 추 탄지 추 용수 조가 유딩의 주가 뒤장에 말이야. 나와텔라. 아니 현다 되세기 처럼 주네 추단 장원 주가 뒤장에나 아니 처럼 체단한 거래. 탄이된 조투고 말이야. 나라디에 뒤 저번도 비가래. 맞아 란도 되게 장고다.
So here we are actually on the point of negating the excessive negations. In other words, called excessive negation. So what is meant by excessive negation here is now according to the system of Madhyamaka Prasangika, the philosopher, the Buddhist schools of thought of Madhyamaka Prasangika, they propound that everything that exists, in other words, entire phenomena, including atoms, not that they have no existence of its own side. There's no intrinsic existence or the inherent existence. Across the board, it negates intrinsic existence. It rejects intrinsic existence across the board. Whereas the other person or the other system, it says if you reject everything, that if you reject the existence of inherent existence of everything, you're actually falling into the view of nihilism. because if you are, by rejecting that, you are unable to establish the nominal existence of things in event. So this will, take you. This will actually enables you to fall into nihilism.
nga tsu ki yung kurang la keshi meba che, tanda nga tsu ki tong de yon do de, nga tsu nyo nyo yoba yon su zoba de, kurang nga chupa di zang ya ma re se la so na, nga tsu ki kurang nga chupa di zang ya me so na, kurang nga tsu ki jo tu sa ma re, ero wa.
So now
Nenga,
just think about, the point here is now, think about when we think about everything doesn't exist in and of itself. Each and every, whatever that may be, it doesn't exist in and of itself. When such ideas comes to one's mind, do you think you'll be able to establish something that is actually existence?
dechi. Ta dindri ki nga tsu ki su su ki sanna tongsa chi jane, dindri ki yu dindri chupa di zang ya meba de, me na kandri jo tu kor sa na, ten jin rewa ju mo ki jo tu kore, se di ki kwa tele kor. Tele so na, tanji tumo ma yinbe, dindri chamo de lo kwa le kor.
So then, when the idea of not existing entire phenomena in and of itself, they're all lack of intrinsic existence or lack of inherent existence. When you have this idea, and if this idea is then reinforced or supported by the idea of interdependence, then you are actually getting the idea or the view of Madhyamaka Prasangika's view, and you're actually having understanding of the subtle level of dependent originations.
dechi. Dindri chi ndo na nga tsu ki, ndi ma kwa se na ta rinpo jaya chi ma re, nga tsu pesha na se oro, se na chungi yume ki yung de to ba zang chi yung ma re, yung de la tenso sa ba zang chi si ba shi ma ro re se na se oro, se na me bi yung la to ba zang chi yung ma re, se na de me chi yin de la to ba zang chi sa ro ye na, dang zi de pen ma to ki zo re, de so ye bi ka la, cha po len da cha po yin so na, ko chi to ba zang chi ba cha de yen da ma ra ye jaya ki,
So it is not appropriate to leave aside by saying this is such a hard topic and I'm not going to go through and listen or studies of this text. So one should not have this kind of attitude. Rather, it says in the text, it says someone who has these merits, even by listening to these teachings that gives the teachings of selflessness, and even by receiving the teachings of the selflessness, even if you have some kind of doubt, if cultivate some kind of doubt, will dysfunction your will be able to dysfunction your grasping itself.
tanda shenju chenpo yala deda tangche tuwe shara tanda song yarwa. Tanda shenju chenpo se shong keda chenpo jase sheba kase lab chenpo je song yana, kari tanda la song na, dame tuwe shara ranji che tanda la song kare sene, jase sheba la song yarwa.
No. So therefore, in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where it is stated that the branches of the teachings taught by the Buddha is for the cultivation of wisdom. So this is how important it is. Every teachings that Buddha may have given in the past, are all directed towards, or in other words, a design towards cultivation of wisdom, realizing emptiness.
deche, tanda sanje yindero, kanshi long le lang de ne meba shenju meba song sene. Da tuni tuwe shara ranji le mena, lesa si keke yamare, kanshi meba shenju meba song, jiba jijang rowa.
So if it is said that if one has no understanding of emptiness or lack of this wisdom realizing emptiness, then one will not be able to reach one's destination.
용될 조합해고 용될 대신 제거에 소소의 로는 계속 고구면도서 타려 마땅하지 쉬운 제거 될 양선 제거에 뺏게 좀 인사로 하지.
One should always try one's best to vigorously to familiarize oneself with this text. As we mentioned earlier, that we should not, leave aside by saying that this is such a hard topic, so it is not easy for me to understand, and leaving aside. This shouldn't be done.
당연 주시로 차려도 돈이 또 싫으면은 그뒤에는 학원 되는 소리지로. 돈이 또 싫으면은 노아지는 요약 그래 말로. 매빠진 노는 데도나 사제 가서 스타도 약간 가서 제도면 돼. 가서 뭐에 지로.
Without having the wisdom realizing emptiness, we are almost living oneself in the darkness, where it's completely lacking the lights. So just like if one stays in a very dark room, so we will not be able to do anything in such a darkness. Similarly, without this wisdom, where our mind becomes so dark and will not be able to get any lights and not be able to send any lights from one's mind.
그러면 미코로 시바세 그래 말이 바세 그러와 미코로 따야 되는 잠을 게 누가 송한테 누가.
So just by looking at that, just by hearing the name of that itself in ignorance, right, is something that is wrong. So we know that just by hearing that.
대체 당연히 많이 가서 해서 때 강의를 대에는 것이 주자의 지면이 니가 세마 좀 맞으세요 되나 뒤 빠졌다 대자일래
Even some of them are
데려와
따니고 순지미 일본이 세바.
데려와
아가라니다 땡이
대체 되는 게 대해서 말로 그는 것을 주실 해서 대해서요 니가 세마 좀 마주바 고가 순지면이 빠네 zul어서 버켜내바네 세마 마주바 면되지 세마 주바 예노 와나서.
So we're on the page 163. Okay, the valid establishment. The valid establishment. So here it is. You said you cannot conventional phenomena, refuting them through investigating. Establish them. As a question about the forms and such, do not hold the valid cognition does not establish them. The valid cognition does not establish them.
알레터 또 뒤서에서는 봐도 되죠. 내려와 단단한 쪽에 세메 주문을 쓰되 단단한 쪽에 엄마 탄지 의료를 시에는 세마 주문 거스데 단단 그게 존에 나치지 봐도 최단데 대바 맞으나 말이랑 장시지 맞으나 아니 탄이도 주를 쓰되 탄이도 주는 세메 맞으 바로 와. 인자데 엄마 탄지 의료라 단단데 세메 주문 고비네 세메 주마주 다이 계셨다 말에 세메 주마주 세데 타니에도 유명 계절에 인사리 세메 주마주 말에 세메 주바레 단다 가자기 제바쳤어.
So we are investigating, or we are actually analyzing the object of refutations or the object of negation here. Now, when it says that you cannot eradicate conventional phenomena by refuting them through investigating whether valid cognition established them. So here it says, according to the Madhyamaka Prasangika, everything that exists, in other words, entire phenomena, beginning from form all the way to the omniscience, are mere, the lack of intrinsic existence. They are all empty of inherent existence. However, it is all of those beginning from the form all the way to the omniscience are actually establish or they are actually exist in the nominal level or the conventionally.
되지. 다른 거 저기 내기 제바제사 타투데 내로 타투를 제바 제거하라 마도 탄에도 여면을 제바 제거야 말아 왔어.
So at this point, in this particular context, that we were actually analyzing Nelu Tatu, which is the ultimate object, or the ultimate nature of reality. We're not actually analyzing conventional truth. We're actually analyzing ultimate truth.
반사자 그러면 쟁아 그러면 쟁아야 가서 되면 쟁아 지내도 요 산지 거라고. 그러면 쟁아 반사.
Let's take a 15 minutes break here.
야, 잠깐만 됐어 로그인다. 됐어 로드. 됐어. 이 너무 지원하스. 내가 로그인하게.
Also,
나긴 지대 세미시스 아래 주선에 오 마스터도. 니가 참아 주마 주세요. 이 야도만 마스. 아네. 이런 것도 배워야 확실히 되자. 세븐데. 야야. 나긴 지대 세미데 시스 손바다 태나나사. 되는 지대비 밀어 소비 시바나데 코나니나 세마니바 까게 유탄절의 세마니바 마가 까바메노 아지 대단 연구를 손도.
oh, let's read. Continuing from the page, still the page 163, where it says the calm. Then how can Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way be correct when it says the world is not valid in any way? Reply that passage that passage refutes the notion that the world's visual consciousness and such are valid with regard to reality. It does not refute their validity regarding all objects. In this way, in the Chandrakirti's explanation of the middle way commentary says.
되지. 아마도 되지대로 앞에는 나긴 지대 세미데 있어야 돼요. 미다 나와나야 세마미 소야 되시 뭐죠 돼. 아니 미다 나와나야 미드 배나 지지르잖아. 미드 zul을 세마이메 계셔 말이에스. 미드 zu기 때 코나니라 세마미바 세마이바데 까바래. 미드 동바니라 zu 동바니라 세마 말이에스. 나다 돼.
So in the middle way, where it's stated that the visual consciousness, such as eye consciousness and ear consciousness, are not the valid with regard to its object. So here, when it says it's not valid with regard to its object, that doesn't mean that the visual consciousness are not valid to its own objects, such as form, sound, and so forth. But rather, the passage here is actually refuting that eye consciousness and ear consciousness, or the five sense consciousness, are not valid with regard to ultimate object of sound, or the ultimate object of ultimate reality of form and so forth.
대단 연구를 내지. 코나니 sambola 파바나 코나 체마 인시 파바 많이 봐 다네 많이 노 지된 비네버 저반 르베 코나니 넘버 쇼발라 제된 저통 체마 캔이나 대다 인다 게된 체마 이나네 제된 되니 통 파진지 저거 파빌 런치 지시샤 넘버 체마지가 네 많이 노 시송발라 이 신제도 송.
So here, accordingly, only noble beings are authorities on the completion of reality, on the contemplation of reality, sorry. Those who are not noble beings are not. Those who are not noble beings would be authorities on the reality if our acceptance of the world's critiques mean that we accept the validity of the world's perception or our analysis of reality. The commentary on the Middle Way says, if the world were an authority, it would see reality. Then what need would there be for those other called noble beings? And what would the noble path accomplish? It is not right that the fools should be authorities.
다 취전저 가라. 아니 저런 예 나기지데 세마 마레세네 상제기 송도와세네 노데 장이나. 아니 디올의 상제 예네 파바신저랑 가르쳐 버선 송도와세. 아니 파비기 가르사 미든 나도스 줄라 세마 마이나. 아니 파바신저랑 고밤도 세네라다 저하네 바와스. 인자디 세마 마레생에데 데코나니를 세마 마레 라바레마도 미든 나도 데코나니를 세마이나다
So what this passage actually, is emphasizing is that, if what we are discussing here is now, if the visual consciousness, such as eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so forth, are valid with regard to ultimate object of reality or ultimate truth, then what need is there where it says what need would be there what need would there be for those others called noble beings, right? And what would the noble path accomplish? Because now here there is the reason why actual meaning of what is meant real consciousness, such as eye, ear, and so forth. Is not valid with regard to ultimate ultimate reality of the form, sound, and so forth.
Shina dene deta mayin no deyi sher nangin jiten semi deyi shi deni gosen jiten nyoba me je son so son da jibin gotson yin no.
So now here it mentions that in the commentary following the explanation of the Middle Way commentary, Chandrakriti says, because mere visual consciousness and such would ascertain reality, it would be a fruitless to work at ethics or to study, reflect, and meditate in order to understand the noble path. However, this is not the case. Therefore, the commentary on the Middle Way says, because the world is not valid in any way, the world has no critique in the context of reality. Also, Chandrakriti's commentary on the Nagarjuna's 60 stanzas reasoning, Yukti Sastika Bharti says.
Ripa Chujubin Ripa Lechang. Tena ji yopa ni de dawa ne teni tong ma yin no xie xia wa zhu. Teni ji xie ma de teni ji xie jiang den de ji mi de na ya cema mi xie so zhang bian na. Yu qi ba jian de kona ni le cema yin ba ga ge yu yin ma yin ba qi xin de se wa na ma de da ma xia na Rime dunjua yin rime don judes, Mila subi sheba deda, Tani bidun zula soba tsema, Yena de konani da ishe de papa panze mugoba palo she manane, Migi sheba zu sheba dan rani, rana, this other, zurala subi shida. Papa jinja tsuwa deme de ta sewa ne shida ndepe ties ndepa ji shi shena as jiba mare ngani de jiba mare o tepa do lo chi lo again lo cha
Let's So now to view those forms and such as simply existing and not to see a reality. In order to establish this, the Bhagavan said, the eye, ear, nose consciousness are not valid cognitions. Since Chandrakirti recites such scripture, it is extremely clear that what he refutes is that visual consciousness and such are valid with regard to spatial object reality, and not that they are valid with regard to other objects. If it is not taken in this way, this statement would be inconsistent. Suppose Chandrakriti meant if visual consciousness and such are were valid cognitions, uh, valid regarding conventional objects such as form and sounds, then it would absurdly follow that there is no need to strive at the noble path in order to perceive reality. This would be as senseless as saying that if visual consciousness is aware of form, it follows that the ear is not needed to hear sounds. On the other hand, suppose he meant if the visual consciousness are valid with regard to form, then it would absurdly follow that it is pointless to strive that noble path in order to perceive things such as form and sounds. We completely agree that this so what unwanted absurdity does it demonstrate?
이거 데 예선 리퍼 주주면 리퍼 인다 다지로 이봐 리퍼 주주면 리퍼 데 있다 가서나 이 가서 파수 쪼바츠 제 유비가라 농시시데 돈에 쪼바츠고 이거라 그서기서나 아니 서적이 비다 나오는 스마미 소샤도 세서나 아니 미다나 단지 집아지 미다 나오는 스마미 제데 줄에 스마미 비다마다 데 코네니라 스마미 비다마리 아니 게시되나 아니 파빌런지 지시샤세 로고된 제미 차고도 와시게 아니 서빌레레도
So here it's mostly argument with other system, because during the argument or during the debate, they simply bringing the quotations or they're citing from the Buddha's teachings, such as the eye, ear, nose consciousness are not valid cognition. So here, we are explaining what is meant by the eye, ear consciousness are not valid cognition. It is we're explaining that that what that really means is that the eyes, ear, nose consciousness are not valid cognition here regarding the not valid cognition with regard to the ultimate object of the sound and so forth. But it is not really negating, it's not actually refuting or denying the valid cognition with regard to its own objects such as form, sound, and so on.
당일로긴다 원한 시접인제 발레지 가양데 암비 넘버 7번데 무슨이도 그렇다네 제체만이도 또가 7번 대양 신도 신도 마제가 시고 melui sheba ne jete na semani de toa namba sheba jamde de jin du she yimi shir zumba le chue je da juma da bu sonso kanshi zumba le chue je da juma da bu yimba dene melua ma yede namba shen de ne bi ngo bo namba shen de na shero de da joba ne 세만이 되다가 리가 많이 돼 넘버 쉐바 탕지장 세만이 되다가 쇼로 제밀라소비 쉐바나 세만이 임바 쭉가게 쭉가봐 제가 당연하나 내니 믿어 나와나야 세만이 쉐소당 면도도 비네 시드 치워시드 쉐바 샤오소 제외 시드 쉐바 샤오소
So, the Chandrakirti's commentary on the fourth of 400,000 says, so the 400 stanza says, it is quite inconsistent to call sensitive consciousness perception, and also to consider it valid with regard to other things as the world sees it. A valid cognition is simply a non-deceptive consciousness. However, the Bhagavan said that even consciousness, because it is composite, has a false and deceptive quality in it, and is it like a magician's illusion, that which has a false and deceptive quality and is like a magician's illusion is not non-deceptive, because it exists in one way but appears in another. It is not right to designate such a valid cognition, because it would then absurdly follow all the consciousness would be the valid consciousness. How do you interpret this general refutation of the position that visual consciousness and such are the valid cognitions? Reply: unlike the passage, eye, ear, and nose are not valid. This passage has been a source of grave doubt. Therefore, I would explain it in detail.
얘기 때문에 가서 대 가래 하고 그래서 제가 세마세디 멀어와서인데 세마 용수 줘봐 다 좋다고 쓰이나 세마를 멀어와이 바지 집아지 엄마 타저기 세마를 맞추기 시간 되고 말 멀어와이만 되고 그래 아니 저랑이 세마데 멀어와이 바래 러도와 세마를 러도와서 세마에는 멀어와이 그때 지금 말에 아니 산적에 아니 뉴셔 단절로 이제 되는 대도 제바에서는 소도 아니 세마 멀어와 말이 소아래 도와서 이게 아무 것은 이리가 또 계셔
So here, as long as one, one accepts the consciousness, the valid cognitions, in other words, the consciousness or the consciousness of valid cognition, the valid consciousness, in other words, it is always the valid with regard to its object, which is accepted by one's own side as well as the other side, but there's no dispute between the acceptance of not being valid with regard to the valid cognition from the both sides. That's all.
재미주부에 세대고 대발이 말로 누와야 말이 세대 제당 있잖아 재미주부 옛날에 로드 참아인소는 친지 제사대 강이 예사되니라 말로와 인시들은 참았으라 그러와 말로와 누와야 말이 참아리
What is meant by valid here? The valid is something that is to do with inevitable. In other words, because the Buddha is said to be the valid being. Why the Buddha is said to be valid being? But what he has seen and what he has known are valid. It is valid with regard to the object that has been known by the Buddha, and so forth. So therefore, the milhua, which is the valid or inevitable, is something that is to do with the validity of the object and then subject.
원나 상적인 디셰 통지 로아레 로도아 되는 시바 디셰로 로아레 와서로나 대 신드는 저거 말에 디시디 시역이 있어야 이제 대 가능로 그 미다나한테 세마미세데 대말에 이랑을 다야지 단다 대다 단지로 유추 되는 데도 지바인 생인데 그런 원어를 따르면도 이 집이 차네 저도 뭐래 계체때 말어 다당은 이제 대다 증거도 취재해야 돼.
So therefore, then again, the other side, the others, position has said that, well, the Bhagwan or the Buddha has said, even the consciousness, because it's false or deceptive quality, because it is a composite. It is composite. All composite phenomena are false and deceptive quality, and like an illusions, magician's illusion, and so on. So now, to negate this, to answer to these questions and to answer to this, argument. So we're not saying that all those composite phenomena are deceptive and has a false quality or the magician's illusions. But what we're saying here is now, when it comes to the subjective, the valid cognition, valid consciousness, or the valid cognizer, although the valid cognizer itself is an illusion, like it is a magician's illusion. This is not this valid cognition is not invalid with regard to its own object. When it comes to the mind that comes to realize an object, it is not a wrong. It's a right way of understanding and right way for cognizing that object. So whether that particular consciousness is valid with regard to its object or not is determined by that object that it is perceived by this cognition, whether the object is realized or ascertained by the subjective mind as it is or the way it is. So this refutation of the position that the visual consciousness and such are both perception and valid cognition is a refutation of the assertion of the logicians. Therefore, let us start by considering what they assert. Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanza says, because these logicians are utterly unpracticed in the sensibilities of the world. You must train them from the very beginning, like young children. Hence, in order to teach them, you question them closely, asking what is perception in your system. They answer a consciousness. They answer a consciousness is a perception. What sort of consciousness? One that is free from conceptuality. What is conceptuality? That's all.
맞아 거대거대 전랑에나 네 전화기 체마데 말로 아래서는 지금 말에 체마이나 말로 아닌 거래 선제게네 디셔 단절이 절로 도와싱이 예네 주주가 정해데 아니 용나 신도 마상이 당 도교와 신도는 마상이 아니 지신의 마상은 부 충분하고 동보 노정 거주가 장지 인비게 아니 도반다고 지레서 되네.
So here, one is arguing by saying that according to your questions, the other referring to the question that raised by the other position, the way you said that the Buddha is stated because all these composite phenomena are false and deceptive quality. Therefore, you also take the valid cognizor as a deceptive and a false with regard to object. In this, that which actually indicates that you have not really have gone through much studies of the Dharma. It is therefore you are having this false understanding of Buddha's teachings of all these composite phenomena are deceptive quality, has a deceptive and false and deceptive qualities.
뭐 봐지 시바 무슨 이노 시바 전자와시 강 또바다 저오 또방 지시 강 되나 미다 지바다 하바 로타바 슈빈디시 예보때 대다 제위시 엄비 넘버 시바 안에 이지랑게 체니 줘도 매바 상나 주비 싫은 무슨지 제 여바 샤데 시에송바다 또바다 제시 마주비 시바네 무슨이든 돼도 내가 마주바네 이지랑게 체니 제다내바다 제바 시바 엄비 시비 무슨 나게 무슨 나게 랑센제베나 주저라 수베 랑게 체니네 무슨 거고 대다게 지자 인베 대다 참아 로사 양 유응하고 대이 랑게 체니 인바 너도 도변되는 치에반조 왔다 랑게 응을 주가 랑게 체니지 주가네 타녀대요 시바 엄비 시바 대남 랑셀라 참아 갈라시 대난데 대나선데 대다 참아 인바가 반에 대나 유가 이상게 체니라 세만되고 거 봐. 얘라 고치네 소도.
So what is this conceptuality? Conceptuality. It is a fluctuation of discrimination that is involved in the superimposition of the name and the types of object, because they are free from that. The five sensory consciousness engages only in the inexpressible intrinsic characters of the object. They are therefore called perceptions. Hence, the logicians hold that perception is a consciousness that is free from conceptuality and non-mistaken. It is non-mistaken in that it apprehends the intrinsic character of the object just as it is. Thus, since all five sensory perceptions comprehend the intrinsic character of their object, the intrinsic characteristic of the forms, sound, and so forth, are the object of comprehended by those five perceptions. Therefore, it is in relation to this intrinsic character of these five objects that they consider such perceptions to be valid. As well as we will explain, that Master Chandrakirti does not accept, even conventionally, that anything that exists essentially or by way of its own intrinsic character. Thus, how could he accept this claim that the sensory consciousness are valid with regard to the intrinsic character of this object? Therefore, the refutation of this claim that sensory consciousness are valid is a refutation of the view that are valid with regard to the intrinsic character of the five objects. This refutation is made by one statement at the consciousness in the false consciousness is false and deceptive. That's what it is.
되지. 나 되게 내가 저기 가르치고 있으면 엄마 로벤 데시디 엄마 타지요. 로벤 배는 로벤 루루도 받은 나와서 산지 장부서 받은 타지와로. 인전 되게 매체기 좋다 뭐 다시 가시는 좋다 뭐 제가게 엄부시바 줄을 뭐 주가 되게 되는 주 저기 천이 주바로 무슨 레스라고. 아 엄마 타지요 이게 주랑게 천이 주바 무슨 세디 시작하나 쓰면 주랑게 천이 주바요. 이 매체기 어서 주바 주 가서 준지 참아게 주랑게 천이 주바라 참아래 세니시와 괜히 제발이다.
So the difference between these two. So first of all, let's talk about Madhyamaka, Swatantika, and below. All those four philosophical tenets, the Buddhist schools of thought, below the Madhyamaka, Swatantika, Madhyamaka, Swatantika, Chittamatra, Vaibhashika, and Sutantika. All those four accepts that when the visual consciousness when the visual consciousness perceives its object, it is also perceiving the special characteristic of this the characteristic of the actual characteristic of the object itself. An intrinsic characteristic, in other words, the intrinsic characteristic of this object. So now, what the Madhyamaka Prasangika is saying here is it is actually negating it, rejecting their assertions, because although the visual consciousness are valid with regard to its own objects such as form and sound and so forth, but it is not a valid with regard to intrinsic characteristic of this these objects such as form and sound, because intrinsic characteristic of the form and sound is not even possible.
피제 녀들 한번 찾자면 시면 아주 단도 배우 강제 중에 좋다 뭐 영수 줘봐 놓으라. 아니 주랑 게 천이 주고 여마를 생기대 다 제는 못 채네 내 이제는 사태 같이 인사로. 여마도 이몽 쳐와들 타랑 있는 다를 차라면서 유리가라 주랑 게 천이 주고 나집에 시고. 좋다 뭐 아주 배우 강제 중에 좋다 뭐 단도 여봐 놓으라. 아니 주랑 게 천이 주고 여마를 생기대 다 지 다와 권한 인사로.
So now I would confidently say that the form that lack of intrinsic character of its own, the form that lack of intrinsic character of its own is accepted and propounded by the Lama Tsongkhapa and his followers. Other than that, because all other schools of the Tibetan Buddhism would actually accepting there's no subtlety, so there's no difference in subtlety of their views regarding between Madhyamaka Prasangika and Madhyamaka Sutantika. So that clearly demonstrates, that clearly indicates that they actually accept form has existence of its own side, or the intrinsic character of their own side.
되지. 맞아 엄마 되게 오미 가사에 내니 요나서는 맞아 엄마는 시우로 오미 내가 또베 빠장지 되네. 그러와 또베 빠장지 되네. 타니도 주번 조치대. 아니 오미 저기 가사래서 좋다 진다 뭐요서 저 또베 빠장지 되네. 한번도 주번 시대에 되는 가용비가라 이시대 타니도 그 조부도 이제때 타니도 주번 뭔지를 거라 또베 빠장지 받은 조부도 이디 오미기 가시기 내대 내려서는 향수 장도 걸. 내가 내려 가지.
So this is a very critical point here. The critical point of middle way, because when the middle way talks about everything that is mere imputed by thoughts, terms, imputed by conceptions or terms and name, then at the same time, there's acceptance of certain acceptance of existence of acceptance of nominal existence or the conventional existence. But this kind of idea is something that is very contradictory to the other philosophical tenets, because the other philosophical tenets, when they have an idea of everything that exists are mere imputed by concept, term, and name, then they come to understand that everything that doesn't exist at all. And similarly, when they reflect their idea or the mind upon the interdependent reality, they come to understand as things that exist, intrinsic characteristic existence of intrinsicness. So therefore, such point, the critical point, is raised by the Madhyamaka Prasangika only, who can actually establish both lack of intrinsic existence and the nominal existence of phenomena.
되지. 그 고아치는 거래. 랑이 천지지 저런뭐지 랑이 천지지 주고야나. 얘라 땜받은 가거리스. 라운드 주고야나 얘라 땜받은 가거리스 온 거지.
So Lama Tsongkhapa stated that if something that exists its own side or the intrinsic character of its own side, and such things or such phenomena, objects, are not then are existing independently without depending upon others. The very term that intrinsic existence actually negates dependence of others.
되지. 그래서 따와기 내가 때 라지보면 저기 시주나랑게 천지 주비 차스나 그래서 엄마 타저기 아니 시주나랑게 천지지 마주비 차스랑게 천지 주고 다이 섬문사지나 사제 되게 말이서 와. 이제로 뭐지 팀모 많이 버리려다 지금은 미시 가지 뼈 가지 줘라 따와때는 병이 윤율에도 아지로 뭐지 마도 얘네 따와때는 또바라지를 때는 남제 대대 방향이 열다 중도는 이게 끄네 희망에 나오다는 이게 따와때는 지 탄력이 제선 전에 제선에 지 중모스 소화돼 그지 여사 말하면 따와질을 쟁에 대 카운트 해주러.
So that's what Lama Tsongkhapa stated as everything that exists intrinsically, or it exists, it has its own intrinsic character of its own, and that is the phenomenon that doesn't depend upon any other factors. So therefore, such phenomena doesn't exist at all, right? So this is the very uncommon or the exclusive standpoint of Madhyamaka Prasangika, and so such the viewpoints or the standpoints are elaborated and given elaboration teachings in the written teachings is only by Lama Tsongkhapa. Although that I'm not saying there's no such great beings in the past who have gained the insight into the nature of reality or the emptiness. But what I'm saying here is they have this, realization of emptiness according to Madhyamaka Prasangika, but there's no such individual who actually came out and make these teachings of lack of intrinsicness, the intrinsic identity, accessible to general public. It is only by Lama Tsongkhapa who actually did these teachings, given elaborate teachings on lack of intrinsic existence.
로버도 맞아 지 템바든 집에 문화정에 나타난 하선지 템바세요 디가라 근데 따이쇼는 시선은 투모만이 오마 타지 따와 대단 집에는 하 들으는 동화선지 지 템바든 지에서는 뭐 벤칭이 거래질에 이만한 게 시내 봐 소고지게 네 저하시면 뭐일이 물리려게 하나저로서 된 지그래 산제 때문에 지그래 이 지 템바든 집에 문화들이 대 캐리한 거 말해서 내가 투사 때 되래 따와 타투비 따와티 타투비 따와 되는 제 리지는 제발라 이제서나 저주 쇼바는 쇼지 거지로 당가 저에는 상시 지내면에 지 노블라반에는 그 노년면 쳐서는 되는 게 지레만데 다 가서 해면 와.
So the Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings or the doctrines or the teachings are said to be the union of both the teachings of the both Sutra and Tantra. In particular, when it comes to the view, the standpoint of the Lama Tsongkhapa is the standpoint of Madhyamaka Prasangika. So it is very precious teachings that we have come across. So we're so fortunate to be able to have to be able to have have access to those these teachings, which completes both sutra and tantra. So therefore, it really requires uh, uh, you know the supporting factors of this ample mirrors that enables us to understand the Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. So it says that, it is just like that although that we have these teachings, it's accessible, and we have this exposure to these teachings, but we are unable to, extract the essence from it. It is somewhat that we are actually not having enough, merits and virtues to be able to have and extract the essence from that. That's all.
들어가서 말해. 누가 맞아 저렇게 지 공부 예 남아치. 그때도 간이 거에는 몇이 다른 거 추시는 거 제세디 니마 남아 쉬우려. 당근에 막 기준이네. 년에 제비는 되게 들어서 세우다 제가 10만 원서 에너지 템바든지 하나 저게 송도세는. 근데 송진도 와. 그래서 지 양모쪽이 다 가서 당장에 지는 몇십만도 오늘 저와 얘나 주년에 쟁에 샤마 쟁에 지어서나 여러모로 시도 시시여서 많아지래. 내가 이 메트로니 지셔. 남주 댕에지도 용 몇십에서 지.
So I was once told by one of my colleagues at the monastery when I was at the monastery, one of the reincarnated lama, that he heard from somebody that the Trushi Rinpoche, who was known as the most realized teacher or masters of Nyingma traditions, who has actually stated that in the future, I always pray from the depth of my heart in the future that I may come across with the teachings of the Lama Tsongkhapa. So it is really true. So if you really go through, if one is quite practicing honestly and studying the teachings, the in-depth studies of the Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, there will be no one who is not actually marveled by the teachings of the Lama Tsongkhapa, encouraged by the teachings of the Lama Tsongkhapa.
고치네 지. 잠대디 진난 신난 줌바 송바티 로데스 아우레 로데 게소아지 대양 로와 송베 미르와 까네 세마 이번 고게 미르와 네 세미 체니 인비 셔로 와나 룰루 강이냐나 제 넘버 젠도 네 넘버 젠도 네 빙모볼라 넘버 젠도 나와 시에송바 대인데 원시 나라 줄라 소바 유가고 되나 랑게 체니지 마주진도 랑게 체니지 주 체니도 나야나 대다랑게 체니라 체마 마이노 셰바테 도나 엄비 셰바테다 유가이 랑센라 체마 마이테 유가이 랑센 나라 되될 수 있어데 이제 유가랑게 체니지 좀 셴도 대랑게 체니지 주가 나위 셰르 빼나 나와니 나위 셰바진 가사 셰바진 나도 공부하고
So this refutation is made by way of Bhagavan's statement that consciousness is false and deceptive. The statement that is deceptive refutes its being non-deceptive. And this in turn refutes its validity, because that which is non-deceptive is the definition of valid cognition. In what sense is it deceptive? The Chandrakirti puts it. It exists in a way, in one way, but appears in another. This means that the five objects, form, sound, and so forth, are not established by way of their intrinsic character, but appear to the sensory consciousness as though they were. Therefore, those sensory consciousness are not valid with regard to the intrinsic character of the objects. In brief, what Chandrakirti intended in this passage is that the sensory consciousness are not valid with regard to the intrinsic character of the five objects, because they are deceived in relation to the appearance of the intrinsic character in the five objects. This is because the five objects are empty of intrinsic character. It appears to have it. For example, it is like a consciousness that perceives two moons.
되래. 되게 타지 투모 많이 비치셔 되래. 타지 투모 많이 비치셔. 세마이나 맞추고 있는 거 말이에요. 왜냐면 존재 안보무수도 zul에 세마이나요. 그 맞추고 많이 가르쳐는 zul랑게 체니 좀 나와다도 요 말이에요. 왜냐면 나와니나 말이에요. 세마이나 맞추고 그것이 타지 투모 많이 말이다. 좋다 엄마도서 세마이나 맞추고 있는 비쳐.
So in Madhyamaka Prasangika's standpoint, if something that is valid cognition, valid cognizer, it is not necessarily be non-mistaken. There is a valid cognition as well as non-mistaken is accepted, and mistaken consciousness is accepted by Madhyamaka Prasangika. In other words, it's exclusive acceptance of the Madhyamaka Prasangika, because the Madhyamaka Swatantikas in below, when something that is valid cognizer, then they accept there should be a non-mistaken consciousness. Because the Madhyamaka Prasangika, why they say that's even though this is something that is a valid cognizer, but it is a mistaken. The reason why they accept that is because when, let's take example, for example, it's an ordinary eye consciousness. The ordinary eye consciousness is actually valid with regard to the form, but the form appears to the eye consciousness that intrinsicness is something that is not valid. It is mistaken. So therefore, the eye consciousness, although it is accepted as a valid cognizer, but it is a mistaken.
조비 산제죠 고번이 와냐도 타네 네 랑제 산제 단지 조비 산제로 고고 그것도 뭐지 지전에 샤오 네 시에네 만드는 슈베 나나 사다지도 신여로도 쓰러서 너무 저러지다.
Let's do our dedication here. By listening to the teachings for 2 hours, we have accumulated merits by doing that. And all the merits that we have gained, along with such as merits of past, present, and future, all these merits are, coming in together to becoming as a condition for understanding of the standpoints of Madhyamaka Prasangikas, and be able to actualize the unity of shamatha and its special insight, and to gain this, then eventually to gain the state of enlightenment. And may all this merits and virtue that I have accumulated at this is become the cause for achievement of enlightenment of oneself and that of all other sentient beings. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions please bless me to be able to do this.
Sabo Juji Rodu.
Ah ja, 对，是。